Did you know sometimes the grown-ups who decide what you learn like to use big words to try and confuse you? Well, they do. I think the best thing to do is learn those words. Then you can say, "Take that, boring old people. I learned your big confusing words." Sure. Now I think we're well on our way. We already know lots of big words. Fiction, nonfiction, narrative, expository, genre. Today I'm going to introduce you to another one. Text. Now, I know it's not a big word, but it can be confusing. You probably think you already know what text means, like sending a text message to your friends. That's actually a pretty good example, but let's see if we can expand our understanding of what text means. Text really just means written words. So a text message is a message sent using written words, whereas maybe a voice message is a message using your voice. Got it? Great. In school, when you hear text, they're talking about the written words in books. You'll probably hear the word text a lot in school. Narrative text, expository text, text-to-text connections, text-to-self connections, so you might as well learn what it means, right? Now let's see how the grown-ups are trying to confuse you with this word. First, we'll take a look at narrative texts. When we talked about narrative and expository, I told you that all narratives have some things in common. Let's review what those are and see how narrative texts are put together. Remember, narrative means it's a story, and text is written words, so a narrative text is just a story written down. First, every narrative has characters, and the characters are just who the story is about. Some stories have a lot of characters, like Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Other stories don't have very many at all, like the Twits. But every narrative has them. Every narrative has them. Great. It's really helpful when you read a story to know who the characters are, and especially who the main characters are. If you're reading a book and you can't remember who all the characters are, draw a diagram like this one. It should help you keep them all straight. And don't worry, lots of cool people use diagrams. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, even had to use one to keep the characters straight as she wrote about them. Next, every story has a time and a place. We call that the setting. Remember when I talked about setting? It's when and where the story happens. Knowing when and where a story happens helps us wrap our brains around what's going on and make sense of the story as it unfolds. The setting can help give us clues about characters and other parts of the story. If a story takes place in the Old West, we'd expect the characters to be cowboys and maybe have a shootout at high noon. If the story takes place in outer space, we might expect astronauts or aliens. See how the setting can help you understand what's going on in a story? Great. Now, it's important to know who the characters are and what the setting is in a story so that you can follow what we call the plot. The plot is basically what happens in the story. What's the story about? For example, the plot of The Three Little Pigs is that three little pigs are trying to build houses, and a wolf keeps trying to blow them down. Great. Now you'll notice that it's really hard to talk about the plot of a story without talking about the characters. There are a lot of ways we can talk about the plot of a story. We can give a summary, which is basically just a shortened version of the story, the basic facts of what's going on. We can look at sequencing, that means the order of events. Think beginning, middle, and end of a story. We can look for the problem in a story and see how that problem is solved. We call that problem and solution. We can look for what happens in a story and why it happens. We call that cause and effect. There are tons of ways to look at the plot of a story, and we'll look at all of them a little bit later. Alright, time to review. Text means written words. So when you hear that word in school, just know that they're talking about whatever's written down. Usually it'll be about the book that you're reading. Narrative texts all have a basic structure involving the characters, who the story's about, the setting, where and when the story takes place, and the plot. What is the story? And we have a lot of tools that can help us uncover those three things. So the next time you're reading a story, see if you can pick out the characters, setting, and plot. Even better, see if you can write something with exciting characters, setting, and plot. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the author of the next best-selling narrative text for kids. Oh, man.